Here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Fyer-Huné. This is my series Creators Through COVID, and this is my long, nearly lost friend, who I am so happy with everything that you've done, that I've seen, and I don't even know much, so I'm excited to learn more. So yeah, just introduce yourself and just take it away.
Hi, my name's Kay. I use they, them pronouns. I'm non-binary and I'm a creative. I do LGBTQ plus activism and I do kind of like a lot of stuff here, there and everywhere. But yeah, that's me.
Wow, I don't know which one to go to first. Which one would you like to discuss first? Like, I'm just like,
I don't mind. Shall we if we just update everyone about like the situation right now and then I'll kind of go back to what I would be doing normally.
definitely do that.
Yeah, so right now I'm a key worker, so I work in Tesco. I'm doing like as much as I can there, so I'm doing about 16 hours to 24 hours a week, doing like evening shifts and bits and bobs. And then I'm also doing a master's in drama in the University of South Wales. So I'm currently in Cardiff, currently in a studio flat on my own, which is it's great. But yeah, I'm where I want to be. So yeah, that's what's going on. If this wasn't happening, I would be working myself into the ground. So I would usually have another job with the student union in their little shop. So I'd be going back and forth between there and Tesco. And then I've just kind of left my post as the LGBT Society president for University of South Wales because I am the incoming welfare officer for the student union.
Wow.
So that is my next full-time role, hopefully after all of this kind of settles the hell down. But yeah, that is my next step.
That's crazy.
Mm.
I've got so many questions. So many. Like, going back to being a key worker, how are you
Yeah.
finding that?
It's a lot. So before, like when this all kicked off, I was like, actually, I'll do like a 9 hour shift every day. And I was like, no, it's physically draining. And it's because you're having to think about a lot more. So you're having to think about like, am I keeping distance from my colleagues? Am I keeping distance from everybody? I need to be aware of what I'm doing, how close I'm getting to people. And so it's a lot more mentally draining, as well as like having to enforce the one-way system, making sure that everyone is basically not being a jerk to everyone else. So you're kind of having to have eyes in the back of your head as well as then doing everything else that you would. So it's a lot, considering the fact that it's usually I would have been able to have done like 4 9 hour shifts a week, where now I'm like I can only do two maximum on top of my other stuff. So I'm like, actually this is kind of the time to just take it as it comes and then just do what I can. And it's like looking back on how I was how I was managing, because I was basically Saturday was my only day off, because I would have been in uni full time on Wednesdays and Fridays, and all of the other days I would have been working all day. So I was like, how was I like going for it? How was I managing? And it kind of this fell at the time of Easter, so I had a week off. I was going to come back to Stoke. I was going to come back for a week. But obviously this has all happened and lockdown happened. So I was like, actually, what I'll do is I'll just stay here for the week. And it was the first time since I think January that I'd stopped. And I was like, oh wow, I cannot do this anymore. Because it was basically working. I think it was about 30 hours a week, as well as doing a full-time uni, as well as being the president of a society. It was a lot.
That is a lot. So, do you feel like this has been quite a nice reflection time for you
It
then?
has, yeah, it really has, because it's kind of been, well, look, the way that I was doing, and I like to keep busy. Like I like to keep busy anyway, but I was kind of running myself into the ground, and some of that wasn't through choice, like doing a master's. And because I'm from England, you only get 10 grand for the entire year. So that would only cover my living costs. It would only cover my course costs. So I was working to live, basically. So I've managed to pay off, because I'm in student accommodation, just because it's easier. So I've managed to pay off that. So I'm now here until September. But it's that kind of, I was having to do that much work because it's just how the cookie crumbled. It's how I would finance my year. And like the Welsh students, who they get the full support that I would have had in undergrad. So they would get a tuition fee and a maintenance loan, whereas with England you just get the one thing. So it was a really kind of like stark thing, but I'm ever so glad that I've done it, because the masters has kind of given me that breathing space that I needed to decide what I wanted to do, to kind of help me hone my skills a bit more. Because like my undergrad was, I started on theatre and drama, and then I moved over to a course called performance and media, which is so timely that I've done that course, because now I'm able to adapt to this current situation, because that's what we were taught. We were looking at how to make performance more interactive, how to make it span the world, and how to make it online. And that is what my degree was. And I was so lucky to have been able to swap, and to learn completely different things than what I would have learned on theatre and drama. And so, yeah, it's kind of all fallen into place really nicely, which is really lucky.
But that does sound like everything is really, I mean, through hard work. It's not been an easy one.
It's not been easy at all.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So you deserve this. And it sounds like that course, like you said, has really gone well. So you're looking now and you're like, I'm not even worried.
It's really lucky, because I think there's this course in the University of South Wales, and then there's one similar in Manchester, and that is it in the country for courses like this. So it's kind of really lucky, the fact that we've had the opportunity to meet these lecturers who teach this way, as well as kind of continuing it on to the MA, which is kind of the best thing about the degree, is that you get, because I've studied in the same place twice, you get to know all of the lecturers, you get the same kind of expertise level. And yeah, it's just been really nice to be able to be like, actually, I don't have to worry as much as somebody else who might have been from a more traditional background, because I kind of know where I can take this project, and I know what I can take, the kind of the stimuli, and I can take the main part of it, and just be like, well, we could do this through this platform, or we could do it through Instagram, rather than making a script. And that's kind of what I've decided I'm going to do for one of the modules, is kind of make like a spin-off of my final project, and look at one character more in depth through Instagram, and that's the project. And kind of looking at different medias, and how you can make like how you can tell story through it. And that it's so interesting, but also nice that we've been given the freedom, because they've kind of been like, well, yeah, just do what you want, just kind of take this time to look at new things and have a play. And that's great. And it's like, one of the best things that we've been taught is the art of failure. It's like, it's absolutely fine to just give it a go, and if it doesn't work, then you just reflect on the practice. You just look at like how it went, and if you can see where it went wrong, then that is fantastic. But just given it a go and just seeing where it'll get you is great as well.
God, this course. Do you know what's really, really funny, actually? You know, you said Manchester did this course. I did it for a year. I did it for a year. It was the best time ever. And because of family stuff, I ended up moving back to Stoke.
Yeah.
And they said, but you know how sometimes unis might just twist them. They were like, oh yeah, it's exactly the same course. It wasn't.
No.
Because like you said, there's only two, and it's an amazing course. It's brilliant.
Great course. because it's like I managed to get to try out radio. Like we had an entire radio module, which was like I would never have got the chance to do it if I just stuck with theatre and drama. And we got a new media performance module, and that was the entire performance, was like, how do you make a performance interactive? So we used like QR codes, we used voting online, so we got the audience really involved. It was like a kind of a trial where people got to vote in it. It's some of the best work that you just get to see how creative you can be. And then the MA is kind of just honed a bit more into certain things, because obviously like during a degree you only get to try things for a term, and it's like that's kind of the sad thing about it, is that you only get to kind of delve really quickly into something. Whereas like the MA has been like, well, actually, what do you want to look at? They'll give you taster sessions, and they've been like, well, yeah, I want to try properly writing a script, because I never managed to tease out what wanted to be written. And then I managed to write a piece called Dear Kay, which was kind of looking back at my life and writing letters to my younger self, and that it's kind of been the best thing that I've written. It was like a long process over kind of December through January, because it was then deciding, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And then finally pinpointing, like, actually, this is a thing that needs to be written. And it's kind of ended up becoming like almost like an archive of where I am now, what's to be coming in the future. And yeah, it's been really like emotional, because it's looking back at stuff that I hadn't really dealt with, but also looking back at things and being like, actually, I'm over this now. And like, yeah, just looking at the development of where I've been and where I've come from, and all of that was amazing.
God, that does sound, my heart is going to be, I feel like, oh God, it sounds beautiful, this course. And how are you finding it, not being doing your masters at the moment?
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think there's certain modules which have adapted better, like Reflective Practice 2, which is the one where I'm on about Instagram. That one's kind of kept up going, and that one's been like, yeah, what we'll do is we'll meet every week, we'll meet twice a week. I think one of the things that some of the lecturers haven't taken into account is like, it takes a lot of mental power to sit in on a video call for 3 hours.
Yes. Oh my God.
That's like one of the things that is exhausting. It's like because we have one class in the early afternoon and then another class in the evening. I'm like done by the time it's 6 o'clock. I'm like, no, I'm tapping out. But there's some classes that have been really, really good, really interactive. And then there's other classes which are kind of being taught just as they would be in a classroom, which is like, actually, you need to understand that this isn't the same situation. It's like people are in their rooms, they are not being able to separate. Like for me, I really benefit from being in a different place when I'm learning, whereas here I'm in one room, all of the common rooms are shut, because obviously it's something that they can't police. I can't go out for a walk because obviously Wi-Fi and things like that. I'm literally just on a desk by the window, and that is my separate space. So it's really kind of trying to find ways that work for you, but also being able to kind of engage with content as you can. It's a lot, and it's kind of like, yeah, I'll go to one class, I'll have a nap, and then I'll go to the next class, just because it's so draining. But I'm glad that they've kept it up, because it's keeping that rhythm, and it's keeping some kind of like like sense of consistency and routine. Yeah, because obviously this happened and then it went straight into the Easter break, so it was like, oh yeah, no more uni, and then you come back after 3 weeks and you're like, oh my God, how do I do this? It's like, how do I get back into that? But luckily it's kind of slowly got back into a bit more of a routine, which is nice.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're still doing good and in everything, because don't give up on this. It sounds bloody amazing, but I'm going to be honest, you don't sound like you give up on anything, which is brilliant. So I wanted to go back to when you were about like Dear Kay, and what is your journey then, if you wanted to go into it?
Yeah. So obviously I was born and raised in Stoke, so I was kind of raised by my dad's side of the family. I was raised through church, so I was raised Christian, and I was brought up through a kind of faith high school. So that was kind of, it wasn't the best environment to be coming out as queer. And so it was then at kind of age 13, 14, realizing that actually I am queer. I'm not what everybody expects me to be. I'm not what people want me to be. And kind of that kind of journey of self-discovery was really hard to go through when you're surrounded by this environment that you know is not going to be accepting. And it's kind of like that journey of losing faith, because I did end up losing faith, and kind of leaving the church when I was just coming into college, and kind of that journey of also not speaking to grandparents as much and kind of losing that side of the family, was it was kind of it was really emotional and hard, but it was also, this is something that I need to do for my own safety and my own sanity. But also being able to, when I got to college, be able to access, like they brought in some sex education people and they were phenomenal because they were the Piccadilly Project from Hanley. And they were the first kind of LGBT focused people that I'd ever met. And that was kind of a really important thing, because that was the first thing of me being like, actually, there are more people out there. And like, obviously, there were people throughout high school, but I wouldn't have known that. I didn't know them. And so it was quite a journey going through that. And then again, with DK, is looking back at that and reflecting on that and kind of being like, well, this is where I've come from, but this is where I am now. And it very much like has made me who I am, because that journey of experiencing a faith and then losing it is kind of just really mind opening. And it's like, as well as being able to study like philosophy at college and looking at all of the other different ways of being faithful but not subscribing to a faith, is kind of really interesting as well, and looking at different cultures and just being a more open-minded person, is kind of like taking what the faith is based on and then just being like, well, these are the core principles. I don't have to subscribe to this religion, but I can follow the like the core beliefs of it, and that's fine. But yeah, kind of looking at how that journey, and then being able to kind of be a part of theatre. Theatre is a massive part of my growing up, because obviously I did the rep from when I was younger, to the Stoke rep. I was part of the young rep players, doing all of those little pieces when we grew up, and then being a part of For the King's Shilling, which Georgie from our class was also involved in.
Yes,
in college.
yeah.
And that was the first time where I got to play a male role. And that was the first time that I bound my chest. So it was the first time that I got to kind of experiment with gender, really, looking back at it and and kind of look at how that made me feel and how it made me look. And I was like, actually, this feels right. And then one of my friends invited me along, because Staff's uni had a trans support group and they would partner with the college. And so I managed to start attending that and starting accessing information through that. And that's how I started learning the words. That's how I started learning what non-binary was, what trans was. And that was kind of the first encounter that I'd had of those words. And it's like it kind of drives me forward now when I'm looking at like the youth work that I sometimes do, and then how I am like a representative for the community, is that it's like I never want young people to go through that, and it's like I never want them to not be able to identify a part of themselves, because like growing up, I was like always referred to as like a tomboy, and like not having the language to be like, well, I'm not a man, but I'm also not a woman, and kind of being in that ether of kind of being like, well, tomboy is a label that I really like and I don't understand why. Kind of having that confrontation and that realization of, well, this is a word that some people use that feel this way. And as well as like seeing a character in a series called Carmilla, which is like a lesbian vampire series, which was on YouTube. And there was a character in there who looked exactly like me, was played by someone who is non-binary, and they called themselves non-binary on this web series. And that was my first kind of interaction with someone who was like me. And that was so, it was just so like revolutionary and kind of just made everything click. And it's just so important to have that representation and those characters that you could connect to, because it's like, I just remember being at college and we had like the monologue challenge that Emma set us, and we were just kind of like, oh yeah, pick a character that you want to choose. And I was like, well, I don't know. And kind of being like, I'll pick two women monologues and two male monologues and see where I fit. And it's kind of trying to find where you sit on that spectrum, especially when the parts aren't there, was really like, it was hard. But then being able to be in a position where I can start to create those parts is really like nice and really inspiring, and being like, actually I can be a part of the generation that starts writing its own content and starts being the representation that people need to see. So yeah, that's a whistle-stop tour.
Wow, it's beautiful that you've now come to like. Do you feel more comfortable now?
Absolutely, yeah. And like DK was a massive part of that. And because I kind of, in my first few years of uni, I was still very much settling into the label of non-binary, but also there are a lot of like expectations that people put on the label non-binary. So it's kind of like looking at, some people are like, oh yeah, but you must be like, you must look really masculine, you must look really skinny, and you must look like really androgynous. And that is such a pressure to put people onto. And it's like, you've got this label that is non-binary and it's basically, it's infinite, but people have got such a narrow-minded expectation of what it looks like. That was a lot to kind of wrestle with. But also then DK was then looking at how, well, actually it is infinite and it's not a thing that you can put limits on, because gender is limitless. And kind of looking at the word queer as well. Like as soon as I found the word queer, I was like, well, this is who I am, because I found that like the word gay wasn't being like, I wasn't a woman who loved women, because I just wasn't a woman. So I didn't feel like I could connect to that word anymore. So I was like, I just need a new word. I need a new way of saying how I feel. And then finding that word and finding like nail varnish. Nail varnish is a massive way that I was able to kind of play with femininity and masculinity and kind of finding where I want to sit. And because like as well, there was, throughout my first few years of uni, I was like trying really hard to be masc, and you can see that it wasn't making me happy. And then I kind of found the word queer, and I started engaging more in the community and engaging more in like just a really queer world. And then being able to be like, well, actually, there's nothing wrong with the feminine parts of me. There's nothing wrong with the parts of me that have that bit of flair and have that bit of like, I used to be terrified of the colour pink. And that's a massive part of being like, you can wear a skirt and you can wear the colour pink and you can still be non-binary. And yeah,
in that, because I was obviously, before I talk to anyone, I like to research a little bit, and I was looking, and that post and what you put underneath saying it's okay, Kay,
yeah,
it, that really did make me feel. I was like, wow.
I was like, because I kind of had one of the original phases of like kind of just narrowing down an idea was this lookbook of just looks that I would get someone to photograph me in, and people would be able to mix and match, and what would they think non-binary would mean. And I'm like, well, that's kind of still conscribing to the thing that people can put labels on you and people can decide how you look. And I was like, well, actually, I want to take control of it. I want to be the person who says, well, you can wear a skirt and that's fine. And so I found an amazing skirt. I was like, oh my God. So it's like
It was like, look,
ASOS. Yeah, I was like, all that's missing is pockets. But I was like,
I love it.
yeah, I ended up wearing it for the rest of the day because I ended up teching for a lot of people's performances as well as like doing my own show in the middle of it. So it's this massive long day. I think it was from like 9 o'clock until 7 o'clock at night. We were performing, then breaking, performing, then breaking, and it was just. I finished in this skirt and I ended up wearing it for the rest of the day. I was like carrying a camera on my arm as we moved to another venue. I was like, yeah, this is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's a massive part of me being able to settle as kind of where I sit now. And you can like tell throughout my photos and throughout where I was in like first and second and third year, that like the MA has been the year where I've been like, well, actually I can start to settle and start to stop being so tense and so defensive about stuff and kind of just be me. And that's been a massive part of that journey. And it's like you can see it throughout the work that I produced on the MA, on the BA, which is like looking at kind of, it explores like trauma and it explores moments in my life where I was like, I'm not okay with this. But as soon as I got to the MA and as soon as I'd settled, I could look back on it and I was like, well, actually, it's hilarious looking back, because I was like, you're clearly not over this. I was like, no, I want to make a piece of work about it. And I'm like, chill, like chill out and just sit down and settle. And looking back on kind of that journey is kind of, it started to just calm, and especially when it comes to like gender and identity, it start to kind of just narrow and settle, and everything's now kind of just serene and floating into place, which is just, yeah, that journey and coming to this point has been really like, just, I don't really have the words for it. It's yeah.
Yeah. How it just, I'm really happy for you. Really, really happy for you. You deserve it. You deserve everything. Like everything that you put your hard work into. And I wanted to talk about maybe you being the president and you being was it welfare officer?
Yeah. So throughout university, I've kind of, first year was very much like, I'm just going to hide away. And it was very much like, I'm coming to a new place. This is a new start. But it was still in a part where I was being misgendered. I wasn't 100% out. And I was like, I'm experimenting. And then as soon as I moved into second year, I was like, right, this is who I am. I'm going to start telling people that this is who I am. And I became the gender identity officer for the student union. So it was a part-time role. It was kind of being the trans representative. It was being a voice on the student council. It was quite an influential part of the student body, and we managed to get Trans Day of Remembrance services that we held. We managed to have some really successful events, and hopefully provided that kind of voice that people needed. We managed to reform like the student union constitution, and I ended up working really closely with the equality and diversity team, and I still do. And they're a massive part of like the HR department in the uni. They're the people that are kind of pushing forward our drive to make sure that we're getting equality in everything. And I was kind of the first student that they really collaborated with and kind of made an effort to reach out. So I was going to these meetings. I was going to these meetings with like people 10, 20 years older than I am, who are in far higher up managerial positions than I am. Like, I was a student, I was a representative, but I was kind of having that voice on these panels and being like, well, actually, this is the student point of view. This is where we are. This is my experience. and kind of being that voice for those students. And we managed to get like proper trans policies put in place. So we were being like, well, this is where we stand as a university on this. This is our anti-hate crime policy, and this is fully covered. Because like when you look back at the bullying and the harassment, there's nothing very specific. So I was like, well, actually, we need specifics in policy, so that if anybody gets attacked, if anybody gets hurt, if anybody gets bullied, then there is something where we can say, well, actually, this is against what we stand for. And as well, kind of, I did that for 2 years. So I did that in my second and my third year. And then kind of moving forward to the society. So I always used to liaise with the society and be like, well, here's an event that I've put on. You guys have it, you guys run it. And then we'll kind of work together from a bit of a distance. But then I kind of said, well, we were struggling for committee members. So I was like, okay, I'm doing an MA. I might as well do it. So I ended up being kind of the figurehead for the society, and trying to turn it around after kind of a year where there was a lot of infighting with the old committee, and it had very much affected attendance. It had affected the society's performance, and so it was relaunching a society basically. So we managed to organise a march in Cardiff Pride, in Pride Cymru. So we marched as University of South Wales for the first time, because the years before the university staff had marched with Stonewall, and I'd marched with NUS Wales. So that was my first experience of Pride, was marching with NUS Wales. And so we kind of decided, well, actually, we want to put forward a united front. The society will be there, we will have our own banners, and we will march with the university staff. And it was a massive thing, because going around in a march with a banner, you then get people lining the streets and they're saying, oh, I'm going there, that's the university that I'm going to. And they're marching in a pride parade. It's one of the biggest like publicity things that you can do, is being like, well, we are here, we are visible. These are all of our queer staff, and these are the queer allies that are standing with us, and kind of being like, yeah, this is who we are as a university. And being a part of kind of, there's a photo of me on my Instagram, which you might have seen, where I'm kind of just stood there with my phone and I'm like looking out, whereas everyone else is looking towards the camera. That was us trying to coordinate where we were meeting on the parade. And I was like, that's kind of taking that lead role on the day and being like, well, actually, okay, what we'll do is we'll try and find where we stood. We'll try and get as far forward as we can in the block, and we'll make this stand. And that was kind of the first big thing that I did as the society kind of figurehead. And then volunteering at Pride Cymru was insane. If you ever get to volunteer at a Pride, oh my God, do it, because it's amazing. I volunteered on the first, so it's a 3-day event, Pride Cymru. So it was, hang on, my Siri's going off. Shut up. So it was, the Friday night was like the first evening, which was, I spent it on the merch stall. My maths is not my strong suit, so I had my calculator on my phone out, and it was just selling merch. It was selling Pride merch, and it was amazing, kind of just seeing everyone in the colours, in the rainbows, and
sounds making me feel warm inside.
Yeah, it was wonderful, and kind of being with, because I've known the Pride Cymru team for ages, because I've worked with them in the society and with the gender identity officer position. And so it was kind of looking at, kind of stood hand in hand with these people that I've known as like mentors, and kind of partying with them, and stood, we were like right near where the main stage was, so we got to see all of the acts. There was a Pink tribute act that kind of just showed up on the night. She was like, yeah, I've got my costume, I've got some songs to go, if you just want to cue them up, I'll go. And she just ended up performing, and I was like, oh my God, there's a Pink tribute act here, what? And then the Saturday was the march. So the Saturday was a horrifically long day. It was so long and it was so hot. it was like one of the hottest days because it's the August bank holiday. So it was scorching, and we were like marching around, and then we had our stall in the in kind of the venue. So me and Duncan, who he was the sexual orientation officer with me for a couple of years, and he was the president before I was. So me and Duncan are like that. We're so close, and we kind of went around all of the stalls, got all the freebies, but we managed to like make loads of connections through that and be like, well, actually, I'm the president of this. I want to make some resources. I want to get the resources out there for people. And so we just ended up getting as much free stuff as we could. Great when you're just like, yeah, I'm the president of the society. Please give me free stuff. And they were like, yeah, cool.
Here you go.
And then the Sunday, I got to spend it on like Pride Cymru's outreach stall. So they do a load of community projects in with like loads of different youth groups, as well as like one which I couldn't take part in just because I was so busy, but it was connecting younger queer people with older queer people, and kind of going into like care homes and educating those people in the care homes, getting them to meet young queer people and kind of start those conversations. So they're doing some amazing work. As well as like sorting out, they got a load of big lottery funding, and they got to do loads of little training sessions and awareness sessions. So I managed to get them a room at the university because I could book certain things for them and bring them into our university and be like, well, we're hosting Pride Cymru. We're being able to give them a space and we can host them here, and bringing other people into the university. So like UK by Pride, they were there. Is it? Yeah, it's Glitter Cymru. So they're kind of the BAME LGBT group, and loads of other different groups where they were kind of like, yeah, we'll bring you in and we'll host you here and get to know you. And it was such a good like experience of being like, well, here are all these different kinds of people that I never ever would have been able to meet if I hadn't taken up the role. And yeah, it's just kind of it's mad going back and seeing a lot of it happen just because I was in the right place at the right time, and that I got to know these people because they reached out, or we've already got like existing connections, and I just kind of took it up, and it was just so kind of lucky and like influential that I managed to get connected to these people, because I've now like made friends for life, made connections for life, and like I know where to go now if I need anything in particular. I'm like, Adam knows that, or Kate knows that, or like whoever else I know, I can be like, yeah, I need to ask him a favour, and they'll do it more often than not. And it's great. It's great to kind of look back and see where these positions have got me and like what they've done for me.
God, that's amazing. Pride. Oh God, that sounds like such a good time.
Yeah, it was like, I think because the year before I was only able to do one of the days. So the year before we only did like the march, because that's kind of all we could afford, but also like the weather did like a really like rough turn. So it was amazing on the Saturday, but like rubbish on the Sunday. And I was sleeping on someone's sofa, so we were just like, nah, we'll leave it for today. We won't go. But then this year we were so lucky with the weather. And it was kind of like, it was long days, because it was, I think I spent most of the day on the Sunday on the community stall, and then I went over to the gate, and I was like, oh my God, guys, I'm like dead. I need to go. And so they were like, yeah, go home, go have some rest because you've been here all day. But yeah, no, they were really great, and I would like highly recommend like volunteering at Pride, because one, you get free admission for the weekend, but also it's just an amazing experience.
I've heard so much good stuff about it. Talking about what people should do, what resources would you say for people like yourself, younger students, what resources are out there that you think would help in any way?
Yeah, so there's some great organisations that do some great stuff. So Pride Cymru again, they've just compiled a massive list of helplines for anyone who needs them right now. So they've kind of just been like, these are all of the people that we know. They've put together a really useful infographic, and that's available for kind of just use. There's also mermaids, so they're kind of more aimed towards younger trans people, but they also kind of support parents throughout it as well. So they're kind of there as the leading UK charity for trans youth. Who else? Who else? So Heads Above the Waves. They are they're a small business, but they're based in Wales, and they are a mental health charity. And they produce some of the most gorgeous posters and merch, and just they are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. And I got the chance to properly speak to some of them at a Stonewall workplace conference, because they had a stall there, and I was like, I want you to come in to the university and we will give you a stand at Freshers. Like, I want you to come in because the work that they do is phenomenal. They've got some wonderful resources, like for anyone who's going through kind of anything at the minute. They've got some fantastic other connections as well. But yeah, Heads Above the Waves are some really, really dope people with some dope merch. And yeah, I've got loads of their posters, and like one of them is like, I'm glad you exist, and it's just some lovely little postcards, and like they've just brought out drumsticks for people who like drumming. They've got t-shirts and jumpers, but yeah, they are some amazing people. Anything else?
Or anything that's helped you?
Yeah.
I don't know, like any books, or I don't know, anything that makes you think has helped you.
Where is it? Is it on my bookshelf? Is it on my bookshelf? I think it's in my other book. But it's the Trans Teen Survival Guide by Fox and Owl Fisher. So I know Fox and Owl, I managed to work with them when I was working on a project called Humanikin, which was kind of a partnership between Youth Cymru, who I work with as a facilitator. It was partnered with Mess Up the Mess, who are also a theatre group based in Ammanford in Wales, and then My Generation, which Fox and Owl belong to. But they have written like a beautiful book, and it's basically just everything that you would need if you're questioning your gender, if you want to know anything about what it's like to be trans. And it's just a fantastic little book with lovely little illustrations. And it just talks about the things that you don't really get spoken to about. So like even within any LGBT lessons that you would get, there are things that you're not going to get talked to about. And it's things like what happens when you start taking testosterone, what happens if you start taking estrogen, and all of those, like all of the things that you would need to know if you are trans, or if you're someone who's supporting somebody who is trans. It is a fantastic book that kind of just works from anyone who is, say, 13 up. It is a fantastic little book. There's also I think it's This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. That one is back in Stoke. Obviously it is. But Juno has also compiled a book called Proud, which is like an anthology of like just pride themed stories, and they're all coupled with an illustration. Let me try and find you one, because they are just gorgeous. Oh, hang on. Is the one about the penguins in here? Because that's cute as hell. Where's the one about the penguins? There we go. One about the penguins. I'll try and get it on the screen. I don't think I can.
Oh, that looks so cute. That looks so lovely.
But yeah, it's just kind of an anthology of poetry and little stories, and they're all done by queer writers and queer artists, and it's a wonderful little book. Like it's very new, but it is a wonderful little book. I can't remember. There's a poetry anthology by I can't remember his name now. that's going to really annoy me.
It's all right, because I can always, once you'd let me know, I can always put a little image here.
Poetry anthology by a working class poet. His first name's Jay, and he kind of set out to write this poetry book. And he's got some poetry. He did a TED talk, I think, at one point, and one of his poems is called "I Am a Man." And it's a great poem, because it's all about him and being trans, but kind of also about that experience. But he wanted to create a poetry anthology for young people who may not grow up in the most conventional of ways. And he says, well, we don't talk to these young adults about what they're going through, and young adults go through a lot of stuff, and it's stuff that's more often not covered in the media. They don't get shown it in books, and it's like they go through this stuff, so why are we not talking about it with them? And yeah, it's kind of looking at how kind of just looking at how he's grown up. Can not cover us. I think that's what it's called.
Are you googling it?
Yeah. Clouds Cannot Cover Us by Jay Hume. And it's wonderful. And it's kind of teenagers deal with racism and sexism and disability and poverty. And it's the things that the mainstream media deems inappropriate for them to see. And it's like, well, it's not inappropriate because they go through that and they experience that. So he's written this wonderful anthology of works that are about him being working class, about him being trans, and works just about how he felt in that moment. And it's a wonderful kind of blending of, well, this is one aspect of my personality, but it's not the whole thing about me. I have these other aspects to me. And yeah, it's a wonderful, it's like a wonderful book that I would recommend. I've not managed to get all the way through it, but the ones that I've read are fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot of the books that I've read have kind of really helped me through. And like YouTubers as well. So there's a YouTuber, Jamie Rains. I think his YouTube handle is Jammy Dodger. He just posts really like just candid stuff about him being trans. But also he documented his transition. So he fully documented what his surgeries were like. And a lot of the time you won't see photographs of people who have recovered from surgery, or you won't see photographs of like people who've recovered from bottom surgery, because a lot of the time it's graphic content. So it's stuff that you're not going to be able to see, but people want that surgery because it's gonna affirm their gender. So he has kind of documented what it's like for him, and he explains it fully about the surgeries that he's been through. And like he's just documented about his bottom surgery and all about what that was like for him. But he also talks about his relationship with his mixed race partner and what that's like for her. And she also has a YouTube channel, so she talks about what it's like, but also just about their relationship in general, not just about the fact that he's trans. And it's a wonderful series. Hannah Hart was someone who really helped me when I was coming out as queer in like 2013. So she did. She started off doing My Drunk Kitchen, which was like her series, but then she started doing a coming out series when she was like, well, I can't hide this part of me from you. So she wrote, and she kind of did YouTube for years. She's still doing it now. And she wrote a book called Buffering, which is all about her life and her growing up. So she didn't have, again, the most conventional childhood. She kind of emancipated herself from her family. She grew up Jehovah's Witness. So I kind of really heavily resonated with her as someone who grew up through faith. And she kind of talks about what that was like and kind of reconciling that faith with who you are, as well as kind of looking at the familial relations. And she again did a recent YouTube video where she says, well, my dad's not coming to our wedding because she's engaged now. And she looks at how, but again, she just does really funny content as well. Just some great content on YouTube. Rose and Rosie, two lesbian and a bisexual YouTubers who are together. They married in 2013. No, 2015 they got married. And that was a really positive thing for me to see as someone who was queer, of being like, well, actually, queer people can marry and they can have relationships and they will be fine. And kind of just looking at how they are basically just comedians, but they're also together and in love and married, and that's just, it's so great to see that represented. So yeah, I think that's some of my favorites, as well as like just any kind of TV show with characters. Oh, let me think of a really good one. What is it called? But yeah, there's some great stuff. There's some great stuff. There's also not some great stuff, obviously.
Oh God, you've got to get the mixed bag, haven't you?
You absolutely have to have a mixed bag. But yeah, there's some good stuff, and there's also some interesting conversations when you look at who should be playing these characters, and that's kind of conversations that I've had throughout my degree and throughout like what I want to do as a professional person, and kind of looking at how we can start to encourage like casting producers to cast LGBT people for these roles, as well as specifically encouraging them to cast trans people in trans roles, because that's something that is still apparently up for a conversation, where Scarlett Johansson can play a trans man. It's like, no, she can't, because she's not a trans man. As well as like Eddie Redmayne when he played Lily in
that film.
Yeah, that was like kind of one that started everything off, and it's like, he did a good job, but also he's not trans, so he can't authentically replicate that experience, as well as there are so many trans actors and trans performers and trans musicians out there where you could very easily look for these people. But a lot of the time the casting agencies will come back and be like, well, we didn't find anybody. It's like, well, did you look? Did you even look? But yeah, I think there's a great thing at the minute. I think it's called Trans Voices Cabaret. They put on performances at the Other Room, the Other Palace, even in London. And so they've done a couple of workshops. They've done some performances. They do like call outs for performers every so often. So they'll be like, we're putting on another cabaret. The tickets are always £10. The tickets are always, they're not the best, but they're always kind of accessible for a wider audience to come and see. And so they're very much like, well, we want to get trans voices out there. And more often than not, because it's hosted by the Other Palace, which is kind of an up and coming theatre in London, you will get casting producers going there, and you will get people being like, actually, these people, will cast them in our show. And I think they released on Instagram a version of the musical that they're writing of the film that Eddie Redmayne was in. So the part of Lily was cast as a trans woman, finally, and she sings through the part, and they have got an all trans orchestra who are playing in it as well. It's a wonderful video. But yeah, there's just so much that's now emerging, because it can emerge and because it needs to emerge. And again, like being a part of sex education over the summer, which was a massive thing. I managed to work with a casting agency to be able to register as non-binary, because before they were just doing male or female, and I was like, well, actually, I want to register as a non-binary artist. So I registered with them. I had the conversations with them, and then getting onto set and actually meeting that there were other trans people in the supporting artist crew, and as well as having the conversations with the costume department and being like, well, this is what I need from you, and this is what you need from me. And then being able to accommodate for what I need, as well as kind of being able to accommodate for what the other people need. Like Hugo, he was heavily featured. So he is, if you watch the musical in the show, he's the keyboard player. So that's Hugo. And they kind of said to him, well, what do you want us to do about the costume? Because the costume went into a V and he wears a binder. So he was like, well, actually, can you kind of just bring it up to the neck? And they did that for him. And so they kind of working with me, and this was all unofficial. I was there as a supporting artist, and I just happened to have these conversations. And I managed to, because of something that happened when I was on set, I managed to have a conversation with the line manager, so the line producer for the show. Managed to get into a room with him and have this conversation and being like, look, I completely and utterly understand that we're in a rush. We've got so much to get through during the day. But if you can just get your crew to use gender neutral pronouns for everybody, you will avoid basically misgendering people, which is what ended up happening. So kind of being on set and not being respected and not having your kind of like your body autonomy respected and being grouped in a different way, it kind of basically ended up me having a panic attack on set. And then it was kind of, well, what can we do to help? And I was like, well, I need to talk to somebody who can make something change. And so he then sent out some resources which I passed on. So I kind of grouped in some, this is what pronouns are, this is how you use them in a gender neutral way, this is how you refer to crowds, like just say folks, just say people. And I managed to work closely with like the third and second ADs and kind of getting them, those who are on crowd control. I got really close with one of our ADs called Mikey, and he was fantastic. And he was like, you've taught me like so much, because they would be like, okay, guys over here, girls over there. And I would just stand in the middle. I'm like, if you don't get it right, I'm going to stand in the middle. And it ended up working. And it ended up them being like, actually what we'll do is we'll have the jocks over here, the nerds over there, the aptitude students at the back. And it changed the way that they were working. And so it was a positive that came from a negative, but it's something that kind of really awoke me to the need for those people and the need for like consultants to go in to these workplaces and to kind of be like, well, actually, if you look at the language that you're using, if you're looking the way that you talk to people, you should maybe try and change this so that you're not misgendering anyone, or you're not kind of offending anybody in a way that you might not be malicious, but it is going to happen. You are going to say something that might upset somebody, but that's fine. And kind of going into these workplaces and being like, well, it's fine to get things wrong, but it's also nice to kind of change the way that you're working and look at things in a different way. So yeah, that's kind of one of the goals for the future, is to kind of be a consultant for theatres, for TV. And yeah, that's kind of the ultimate dream.
It's a good dream, and I'm going to be honest, you've definitely got the right steps in there. Like, you've done the president, you've done this, you've done that, you've worked for Netflix, like you've done all this stuff to help and to motivate people, that I feel like that dream is seeable. Like, I can see it. Give it a couple of years,
yeah,
exactly. It's going to happen. So the last thing I wanted to do, because I didn't want to take too much of your time, and I wanted to end on, what advice would you give? And that's a big one, I know, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right.
Big one.
Yeah, my biggest thing is only do things when you're ready to do them. Because like I came out for the first time when I was trying to piss someone off. So I kind of said, you know what, I'm gay, and I know that it's going to annoy you. And sometimes it's good to get it out there, but also sometimes you're not ready for that. And so make sure that you are ready before anybody else. And sometimes people are saying, oh yeah, I could always tell. And it's like, well, that's for them to know. But it's also, you have got to be 100% comfortable with what you're saying, because if you come out before you're ready, or if you kind of say things on a whim, there are always going to be kind of like a pushback from that. And if you're not 100% comfortable with who you are, there can sometimes be a bit of pressure. There can sometimes be backlash from that. And yeah, I would kind of say take all the time that you need in order to get to that stage where you are comfortable with yourself and you can say, well, this is who I am, and sorry, but I'm not changing for anybody because I'm comfortable with who I am. And that's kind of worked the best for me, is kind of just giving yourself that breathing space and that time to just sit and experiment as well, and kind of try and not be afraid of looking a certain way or reading a certain way, because that's just what other people think. And that's been the biggest thing for me as well, as being like, well, sometimes this is a personal journey for me, sometimes this is something that I want to experiment purely for me to know that this is okay. But when you get to a chance where you can like show who you are and kind of be yourself, it's really empowering for other people to see, because that's been a big thing for me as well, as me being so out and open kind of helps other people see that non-binary people can exist and they can have happy and full lives. And that is something that's helped me get there, is being like, well, if I'm happy and settled and safe, then this shows that other people can be happy and settled and safe. And that's kind of been a big push for me and a big drive for me to do what I do and how I do it, is that. And then as well, kind of just reaching out and building a network of people. Maybe it might be on Twitter, it might be on Instagram, it might be wherever else you can, but reach out to those support networks and find a local group or find an online group at the moment, because the groups are having to go online, and kind of just connect with them, because the worst thing is experiencing this on your own and experiencing it in an environment where you might not be able to. And even if it is just online, kind of just changing a username or changing your name on Twitter, or if you've got like a Finsta or something like that, changing a name online can be really affirming. Like if Starbucks opens up again, if a coffee shop opens up, try out different names, and try out letting people call you a certain thing, or try out new pronouns, but only try that in an environment where you are safe to, and you are you have had those conversations with people being like, this is a space where I can be called this, but if I am going home or if I'm with a parent or a guardian, then I need you to call me this, and kind of set those boundaries, because that's how accidents happen. If you don't set those boundaries, then somebody can refer to you in a different way, and it can lead to some unfortunate things happening. But setting boundaries for you and for other people is really helpful as well. So yeah, I think those are my three 3 points. And volunteer. I would recommend to everybody to volunteer, because that's where I've got where I am. I volunteered for the gender identity officer, and that's got me to where I am today. I volunteered for Pride, and that has got me to where I am. And I volunteered for other projects, for a work experience project, and that has got me a job. And that is how I've pushed forward. I left Tesco for a year in my 3rd year, and I spent that year volunteering whilst I was doing my degree. And that has been the best decision that I've made. It kind of pushed me into my overdraft, so I was not the most financially safe. But if you can work it out and you can volunteer as much as you can, I would recommend it wholeheartedly, because it is just something that you can do, and you know that you're having a positive impact. It's the self-serving aspect of volunteering, is the fact that you're giving up your time, but it's also it gives you positive endorphins. It is a positive experience when you volunteer, because you are doing something for other people out of the kindness of your own heart, and that gives you something back automatically. And yeah, volunteer.
Okay, these have, you know what? Thank you so much for this time. I've learned a lot, because I am not educated in that way.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say is that since cutting my hair, everyone does think I'm a lesbian now. Not even Jim can you. And that annoys me, because it's not that because I'm not a lesbian, it's because that shouldn't be a stereotype.
Yeah, it's looking at, and the way that we educate people about, look, gender expression has got nothing to do with identity, with our gender, because our expression is something that is completely different to who we are. And that is something that is part of the awareness sessions that I teach, but is something that is slowly, hopefully, starting to change. I'm seeing it more in Cardiff. But yeah, it'll be a few years, I think, before it gets to Stoke.
Hopefully, well, I'm in Manchester, so hopefully Manchester is better, but Stoke is, well, we know Stoke's
Yeah, we know. But yeah, I think it's as soon as it hits mainstream education, I think, because that will be coming soon, is the fact that as soon as we can start having these conversations about, well, whatever you look like and however you feel comfortable has no real reflection on who you are on the inside. It might correlate, but it's got no reflection on who you are or who you fancy, or if you don't fancy anyone. And that's like, it's completely and utterly separate, but it can also have those connections. So yeah, things are complicated and people just need to get used to that.
Exactly. Good. Complicated's good, because it means life is supposed to be a challenge. Do you know what I mean?
And things are complex and understanding. And when you go through a journey such as like self-discovery, and when you've asked those questions about yourself, you naturally become a wiser person because you understand yourself more. You can have those conversations with yourself and be like, well, actually, no, I am cisgender and I am straight, and that's absolutely fine. But you've been able to have that conversation with yourself where you've been like, well, what if I am? And that's fine, but I'm not, so that's also fine. And you find that if you go through life and you don't ask those questions, that's when you get things like fragile masculinity, and you get people who are very, very defensive about the fact that, no, I'm straight. And that's where the shame comes in, is the fact that because they haven't asked themselves those questions, because they've been scared to, is the fact that there's something there that they need to deal with.
Yeah.
If you do have that thing, and if you do deal with it, then you naturally just, there's a weight that's lifted off your shoulders when you're able to have that conversation. But yeah, experiment and explore, people, because god damn.
Yes. Oh God. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and I'm gonna link your stuff onto this video, because I feel like
definitely I'll send you that.
you're a good support person for a lot of people, non-binary or binary, anyone. You are there for everyone, which I think is beautiful. It's been amazing reconnecting. I'm going to be talking to you a lot more.
Absolutely.
Can't wait till we both go back to Stoke and we can both be like, brilliant. But thank you so much for your time, and I will leave you be. You could probably need a nap after this. But thank you very much, Kay.
Yes, it's been wonderful. Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.